Ready?
Testing. It's working on.
Testing. Is it working?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. Hey guys, so I'm here with my husband Zach, and we're going to just talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because we read this book together. We read it aloud on our drives and before bed, and it was really awesome, and we've had so many discussions together about it. We loved it, and we want to talk about it some more. So hence why we are talking about it today. This was the second time that I read through Frankenstein. I read it the first time for a university course on romantic lit, and I was really surprised at how much I liked it, because going in I just thought, oh, Frankenstein, it's going to be sci-fi, it's going to be a bit horror, I'm not going to like it because I'm not really into that thing. But this book was so much more. If you haven't read this story, the story is about Dr. Frankenstein, who is a Swiss. He grows up with an amazing family in the beautiful Alps, and he's really intelligent, and he wants to do great things in science. He studies science, he goes to university, and he decides that he wants to become a creator of life and find a scientific way to create life, to literally give life to a human being or a body similar to a human being. So that's what he does with his monster. And then the rest of the book is kind of the repercussions of that. Dr. Frankenstein doesn't take good care of his monster. As soon as the monster awakes, Dr. Frankenstein is terrified and he abandons him. He doesn't do his duty as his creator. He doesn't do anything to make the monster happy or comfortable or teach him about society. He just takes off.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest surprises I had reading the book was how wrong modern culture shows Frankenstein, in the stereotypes and stuff. Often he's the green monster that got, created through lightning, and he's a big oaf, and he can't really make words, and, he's a bit of just a buffoon. But in the book, he's, incredibly articulate. Mm-hmm. He's extremely athletic and mobile and, has great control, I guess, over his created body. But the most surprising part was how much of, an intellect Frankenstein's monster was.
Yeah. Well, because it's Frankenstein's monster, but he actually has such human qualities. He is formed out of human parts. His mind is capable of understanding and comprehending and reasoning like a human. He's even capable of human affection and love. And he teaches himself, he watches humans and copies them and teaches himself how to be a human just based on their behavior. And that desire to be human and to fit in with the human race is so strong within him. And part of the reason that he really becomes a monster in the sense of he gives in to depravity is because he doesn't quite fit in. He's close, but he doesn't quite fit in, and that's because of his physical appearance that is revolting to human beings. And so anytime he gets close to a person, they scream and they try to beat him and they just get out of there. And so he's completely rejected by human society.
Yeah, but partly on that, I would say, is that his nature is skewed. And I think especially with older writing, people's reaction to innate reaction, knee-jerk reaction, often tells you a lot about what they're reacting to, the true nature of what they're reacting to. So I don't think it's a coincidence that in every single occurrence where Frankenstein's monster meets another human, they're just abhorred by what they see, and it's detestable to them. I think there's a reason that human nature in Mary Shelley's book receives Frankenstein's monster as such. I think is for a reason, in the same sense that they don't give Frankenstein's monster a real name, because he's not human. And as much as he tries to imitate humans, as much as he tries to grow closer to humans, he's not a human. And there's something evil and detestable about him that just comes from the soul of people.
Yeah. And you and I have slightly different perspectives on that, because I feel such a compassion and sympathy for the monster. I mean, a huge section of the book is him telling Dr. Frankenstein his experiences after Dr. Frankenstein abandoned him, and how he survived in the wilderness, and how he ended up finding a cottage where people lived, and how he lived outside that cottage and watched them and just fell in love with these people and this family dynamic, and seeing the human heart and what it was capable of. He fell in love with that. And then he had these great plans to reveal himself to the cottagers, and he really hoped that they would accept him. He felt like they were his friends, his family, because he literally spent half a year living with them, although they had no idea. And so I just felt so awful when, surprise, surprise, the family took one look at this ugly thing and completely freaked and turned on him and would have nothing to do with him. And that was the point in the book where the monster's heart is completely broken, and that's what leads him to react the way he does. And for me, I think that Mary Shelley is trying to bring a point across that when you judge somebody based on their outward appearance or based on the fact that they're ugly and hideous, or they don't fit into society for whatever reason, and they become isolated in society and have nobody, and they're just rejected and they don't fit in, that's going to bring people to really dark places. That's going to do some major damage to the human heart.
Yeah, and that's another big theme in the book, companionship and good companionship. Not just, like the relationship between Frankenstein and his monster was a very skewed relationship or companionship, but it was a companionship nonetheless. That, not to spoil, but when Frankenstein dies at the end of the book, the monster decides that his life isn't worth living anymore because he's lost that companionship with his creator, that relationship that he could have with no other. And at that point, he regrets what he had done to Frankenstein. And I think that's really the hallmark of the book: have good companionship. And when you do get it, don't neglect it. Like Frankenstein unfortunately did due to circumstances, but he neglected his relationship with his fiance, with his father, with his friend, with all these people, like all these good people in his life. He neglected that companionship, and he suffered miserably because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not just any companionship, like you're saying. This book just utterly praises the family and the dynamic of a healthy, loving family. Like, it's so saturated in family love. And so that's obviously a big part of, hey, these are the relationships you need to value. And then you have Henry Clerval, Frankenstein's best friend, and they're youthful young men together. They're going through life and university together, and they have that connection, and that's an important relationship. And then, like you said, the relationship with the higher being, the creator, something outside of the world. I mean, a huge part of the book is that Dr. Frankenstein didn't do his duty as creator to the monster. So Dr. Frankenstein had a duty to his creature. The creature, even though Dr. Frankenstein, his creator, abandoned him and did not treat him well at all, he still he wants Dr. Frankenstein's love. He wants a relationship with Dr. Frankenstein. He brings everything back to that. Like, you, Frankenstein, you abandoned me. You did this to me. You put me on an earth where I had no companion and was rejected by everyone. This is your fault. You did this. And you refuse to love me, to make up for it. And I think that goes to show that creatures, no matter how debased, they need some kind of relationship with their creator. That's, in a sense, what gives them purpose and an understanding of their identity.
Yeah. Well, and part of that, too, is, like, controlling ambition. Like, yes, Frankenstein, from the get-go, had this ambition of creating life, of doing what no other man had done before, even thought of before. And there's nothing wrong with being ambitious, just like the other guy from the beginning of the story writing the letters and at the end of the story. There's nothing wrong with having that ambition. You need to keep that in check. And so when you take on that responsibility of bringing something into the world or fulfilling a certain ambition, you don't just wipe your hands clean of that. No, you have a duty now to follow through on that. And that's why it's important to constantly look over your ambitions and reflect on them and say, okay, this is where I started. That was my goal. I want to kind of follow through on that. But what do I have to change? Maybe my end goal that I thought is in one spot, that now that I know more, now that I've learned more, now that I've experienced more, maybe that changes. Maybe I can shift that to somewhere else, because if I go that way, that's going to cause a lot of problems. And so, yeah, ambition is an awesome thing if it's kept in check and if it's refined.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part of the book as well. I mean, Dr. Frankenstein plays God. He goes beyond the bounds of science. He's doing so to make a name for himself. It's quite self-motivated. He creates life out of, mangled body parts that he puts together and then uses electricity, like whatever. Mary Shelley doesn't tell us how exactly that happened, because it's impossible. It's not a real thing.
I like how she explained it as like, oh, I'm not telling you because I don't want anyone else to have that information.
Yeah. Yeah. But it just goes to show that when we're so progress-driven, and progress in the sense of science and technology and stuff like that, we can take things too far to the point where we can't even control what we've created.
Yeah.
I mean, you just think about all the potential with AI.
Yeah.
Like, that's an incredible thing that mankind has created, but there's a lot of potential there for evil and for things to get out of control, and we don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
But I think at a certain point, we need to say, hey, if we go beyond this boundary of knowledge and technology, there's going to be some potentially disastrous consequences. And so we should just not go beyond that boundary, even if it might be possible. We shouldn't, because we as people cannot control that and what's going to happen because of that.
Can't take on that responsibility per se.
No. And
the weight of that responsibility.
And it's human hubris, and not even hubris. Like, it's a good thing to want to know more and to want to make more and do things to better society. And Frankenstein thought he was doing a good thing. He thought creating life would somehow be beneficial. But then the second that monster woke up, Frankenstein knew this thing has the potential to destroy humanity, and I cannot control it, and no one else can control it. And it's out of my hands now. Like, this is a being with its own mind and its own life and its own ambitions. And now what? Yeah.
And that's the most extreme example of that, I guess. But you can look through that in even our own personal lives as well. I mean, when you're, committing to someone, like a marriage or a relationship, you do that not just because it's fun, because, it's going to be a good time. No, you take on a certain responsibility with that. And you need to make sure that when you're taking on that responsibility, you're not going to regret that. And what does that look like? It doesn't mean you're always going to have fun. You're always going to be making breakthroughs, and you're always going to be enjoying what you're doing. I mean, Frankenstein certainly didn't. But it's a building of, maturity and just sticking to your guns. That's how you develop as a person and how you grow. If you're switching from one thing to the next, you're never really going to change. You're just shifting your focus and kind of interweave that into the themes, although it's not directly in the book. But.
Yeah. Another thing that really surprised me about Frankenstein was how much of a travel log it is, and how much it also talks about kind of history and philosophy, and, there's a lot of allusions to historical figures or ideas or whatever. And that's really interesting, and that's kind of, all classics kind of have that to some extent, and I wish that was more prevalent in contemporary fiction. But I was just shocked by how detailed Mary Shelley's descriptions of the Alps were, and, the Rhine River that they travel up, and everything from England to Belgium to Germany to Switzerland to the Arctic, which they end up in the end, so descriptive. And I think that's part of the reason why it's qualified as a piece of romantic literature, because the Romantics were so focused on being in tune with nature and what is nature telling us and how do we fit in with nature. And even the monster himself, there's a couple of chapters where he talks about how he fit in with nature and how he learned how to live with nature and benefit from nature and give back to nature and all that. That's also a huge element of the book that I was surprised to find.
Mm-hmm. And you can even interweave that into the story. If nature is the great, Mother Nature is the be-all, end-all, that has final say in things, who is Frankenstein to meddle with that? And I think, again, you feel a lot of compassion for the monster. I find that hard because at every instance in the book, he's described as a fiend, as a monster, as someone who just cannot control his inhibitions. And yes, when he wanted to make friends with that family, that was really sad when they rejected him. But how did he respond to that? He completely thrashed and trashed their house and burned it down and did this and that. The same as when he felt anger towards his creator, he went and killed his younger brother and eventually his wife and his best friend and indirectly his father. And people humans in general, I think we can all agree, have a twisted nature to an extent. We can all look in our own lives and see problems and mistakes that we make. But Frankenstein's monster is a whole nother level of that. Someone can slight you, or someone can really, really hurt you. You're not going to go and kill his brother. You're not going to destroy his house.
No, that's the thing, right? Is I think you're right. The way the monster reacts to things isn't how people typically react. But I do think that he's kind of an exaggerated version of what we can be. I think there are people who would react that bad. I mean, hopefully very few. But I think what Mary Shelley is showing is that this is kind of the extreme end of human nature. We can become like this monster. He is the worst version of us, but nonetheless, he is in some ways a version of us. And that's, again, why I feel sympathy for him, because I don't really see him as a monster. Physically, yes, he looks like a monster, but I see so much human in him in terms of his, like we've talked about, his intellect, his heart.
But I see, again, coming back to the Mother Nature theme and how it's power and control, I guess. And Frankenstein's monster is beyond nature. It's outside the bounds of nature. And because of that, it's twisted and it's wrong.
But at the same time, he's still subject to nature. Like, nature is still bigger than him. Like, sure, he can scale mountains quicker. He can survive longer in the cold. When you read these accounts of him trying to survive in the woods off berries and whatnot, and he still gets chilly in the cold, and, you know, he still sweats in the summer, and there is some aspect that he's a little bit beyond nature, you know, different in terms of his relationship to nature than a normal human being, but he's still below nature. He's still not a god. He's still a creature.
But that follows in line with that romanticization of nature. Like, you can't beat nature. It just like you can have descriptions so beautiful in a book, but it still doesn't touch the power of nature. And the goal of these writers was to somehow scratch the surface of that through their writing. And that's why I think that Mary Shelley, just in all of her descriptions of the monster and every interaction with the monster, there's something twisted and wrong, because it's not the beautiful and perfect thing that is nature, and that is romanticized.
Yeah, that is nature in the sense of what's out there. But you and I both agree that human nature is fallen and distorted from what it was meant to be as well. God created us in our perfect form, and we are mere imitations of that now in this fallen world.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what Mary Shelley is getting at too. Another thing to add to what you were saying about nature being bigger than anything.
Yeah.
I mean, even the circumstances they're in at the end of the book, where they're literally as far north as you can get in a frozen ship surrounded by ice. Everyone up there is pretty much dying, and Frankenstein's monster led him there to that extreme temperature because he was like, here, both of us we're subject to the elements. Like, we're out of our element. We don't belong here. This is the harshest, extremist conditions you can get. And this is where we're going to die. And we're going to let nature, in a way, still have her way with us up there. Extreme. Like, I just think the extremeness of that climate and that situation where everything comes to a head and where both Frankenstein and his monster die, I think that's important somehow.
I do. I struggle with the fact that Frankenstein's monster was relinquishing his life as well, because he was in control of that situation. You know, he was leaving little letters here to make sure Frankenstein didn't lose the track, and he could dive in the water no problem, and he could, you know, sleep outside no problem, and again showing his, you know, supernatural finesse over nature, and the fact that he wasn't as punishment to nature as Frankenstein was. And I have full belief that if Frankenstein's monster, you know, prevailed over Frankenstein, I think in his mind, though it hadn't happened yet, he was just going to go back and try his hand at another life. I don't see him acknowledging the fact that, oh, once Frankenstein dies, I die. But maybe I missed that.
No, I don't know if that was his plan. But then, of course, we see that once he realizes Frankenstein is dead, his entire purpose for living is gone, because at that point, his purpose was just to make Frankenstein miserable.
Yeah.
And then Frankenstein's gone. He can't make him miserable anymore. And then all of a sudden he's like, my creator is gone, and so is my purpose. And so I may as well die too. And so he does. So I think I can, agree with what you're saying, that the monster is less subject to physical outside nature than Dr. Frankenstein is. But at the same time, he's still very much subject to nature in kind of the emotional, spiritual sense, where it's human nature to crave connection and to crave community and being with people. It's the monster's nature too. And the fact that he never experiences that fellowship and that love, I still see that as that's what killed him. That's what took him over the edge and turned him into what he was, is that he couldn't have that. He couldn't satisfy that innate craving that we all have. And that is so, so sad, to be so, so lonely. Like, I think there's a part in the book where he said, you know, even Satan, when he fell from heaven, he had other devils come with him. And yet this monster, he doesn't have that. He's a devil, but he doesn't even have his co-devils to, you know, wreak havoc with. He has nobody. He is the single solitary creature on earth. That's where my heart breaks. And that's always going to be my main takeaway from this book, is look at what happens when people are lonely and when there's no love between creature and creator, and there's no love between creature and creature. I think that's where we can be glad that that's not the case for us.
Yeah.
That no matter what, even if we don't have people in our lives who love us, and even if somehow we're on a desert island by ourselves and we don't have companionship for the rest of our life. We know that our creator loves us.
Yeah.
And the monster didn't have that.
Yeah.
But we have that, and that can be our comfort in life and death.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always going to feel sorry for him, and I'm always going to love Frankenstein's monster, and just because he is the single solitary creature on this earth that didn't have that. Do you have any final thoughts?
My big takeaway was the ambition of how you need to keep that in check, and how ambition isn't a linear upwards arrow. It's multi-dimensional, and it's constant refining, and 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, and however long that takes to reach said goals. Shelley really wants to hammer down the fact that you need to be careful, and you need to be intentional with what you're doing.
Intentional with what you're doing, with your knowledge and your skills, and also intentional with your relationships.
Yeah.
And how you're treating those around you.
Yeah.
I think I agree. This was a really good discussion. Thanks for being here with me, Zach.
Yeah.
This is awkward. Now it's like, what do? We're just going to turn the camera off and go back to our life. If you enjoyed our discussion about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and you have anything to add, please add it in the comments below. If you liked seeing Zach here and thought he had a lot of good stuff to say, let us know too, and maybe we can talk more about books that we've read together. I think that would be cool, since we are a reading couple, and that's our new tradition, and that's going to be the thing we do, is read together. So
couples that read together stay together, they say.
So true. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.